scripture passage is found in Luke chapter 5, the first 11 verses. You can find it in the Pew Bibles on either page 835 or 1597. I hope you'll follow along as we read this story. It's a familiar story, and it's the one that I talked with the kids about. So Luke chapter 5, the first 11 verses. One day as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, people were crowding around him and listening to the word of God. He saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets." When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. And then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on you will fish for people." So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him. Let's pray. Father, we ask now that you put aside those things that would distract us, those things that when we walk out these doors are going to be very present in our lives. But Father, here in this place in your presence, may we put those things aside. May we hear your voice. May we encounter you today, much like Peter did. And may we walk away not being the same as we hear your voice and follow it. In Jesus' name, amen. So a few weeks ago, I was with several people from the church, and Patrick and I were telling a little story about a person, and I said, somewhere along the line, you'll probably hear this in a message. So some of you are going to recognize this story. I want to talk about Alfred Nobel. In 1866, Alfred Nobel invented dynamite, and he built companies and laboratories in more than 20 countries all over the world, and in the process, he amassed a considerable fortune. When Nobel's brother died, the newspaper made a mistake and ran an obituary for Alfred instead of his brother. In the obituary, they stated that he was known for creating the most destructive force known to mankind, dynamite. And when Nobel read that obituary, he decided that he didn't want his family name to be remembered for destruction. And so while science had built the foundation for his own activities as a technological researcher and inventor, efforts to promote peace had always been close to his heart. So he began thinking about giving away his fortune as a means to recognize those that have made significant contributions in physics, chemistry, physiology, or medicine, literature, and peace. On November 27, 1895, Nobel signed his final will and testament, and he died on December 10, 1896, and it was discovered that according to his will, his vast wealth was to be used for 5 prizes, including one for peace. The prize for peace was to be awarded to the person who shall have done the most or the best work for fraternity between nations, for the abolition or reduction of standing armies, and the holding of peace congresses. And just before his death, he confided in a friend, "I want to be remembered for peace, not destruction." It's a little background on the Nobel Peace Prizes. And the writer of that story said, what will your obituary say? Or to put it another way, how will your life be summed up? And I think about this story today, where Jesus encounters Peter and his friends and their families. They're working on their nets. They're doing what they do day to day. And you know me and my songs, and the song that came to my mind was Dolly Parton, "Working 9 to 5. What a way to make a living. Barely getting by. It's all taking and no giving. They just use your mind, and they never give you credit. It's enough to drive you crazy if you let it." And people love that song because it so speaks to what our life is like. And whether it's 9 to 5 like Dolly Parton working in an office, or out day after day on the sea fishing, you can feel like you're just working and there's not really any meaning to it. And today I want to share with you that Jesus offers more. Today he offers more to Peter. As we come to this story, this isn't the first time that Peter has met Jesus. And I'm going to use the name Peter. It uses Simon and one time Simon Peter in this passage, but I'll use Peter for the sake of familiarity with that name. Peter's brother Andrew had actually been the one who introduced him to Jesus. So Peter had been listening to Jesus. He had had Jesus in his home because a couple chapters earlier it tells us that Jesus had healed Peter's mother-in-law. Peter was this hard-working fisherman. He was carrying on the family business, but in the midst of this 9 to 5, Peter knew inside that something was missing. I wonder if he asked himself, what do I want to be remembered for? Maybe those questions were prompted as he listened to Jesus talk. Maybe Jesus' words struck something close to his heart that, man, could I be remembered for something more than fishing for food for people? And you see, I think this story with Peter, the fact that Peter knew Jesus before, reminds us that our journey with Jesus unfolds over time. We like to talk a lot about that one moment when people make a decision to follow Jesus, but that's usually a culmination of a lot of things that have happened. And in my devotional book, my favorite devotional book is Oswald Chambers' My Utmost for His Highest. And in the January 12th devotional, Chambers wrote, God expounds things to us as we can understand them. And it is a slow work. And so I was reading a message that someone wrote about this story, and they said, although they, referring to Peter, James, John, and probably Andrew, although they had followed Jesus at the first call, they did not yet follow him in a complete and unconditional manner. They were still, at least for part of the time, engaged in their trade as fishermen, as today's story shows. And the writer of this message, speaker of this message, said it was time for them to become permanently attached to him, accompanying him wherever he went. The time for a deeper level of commitment and involvement had come. So really, as this day comes, Jesus is readying them that this is the time for them to choose to align their time and their talents and their resources with Jesus' priorities, which are to seek and to save lost people. On this day, Jesus will move Simon Peter further on the journey, and it starts by him making a simple request. Put out into deep water and lower your nets. Not such a hard request, we say, right? Well, this request runs contrary to everything Simon Peter knows, because if he's good at anything, he's good at fishing. And he knows that any fisherman worth his salt knows that you don't fish in the morning and the day, you fish at night. And you don't fish in deep water, you fish in shallow water. So Peter, if he agrees to this simple request, risks looking like a fool. Yet, he's been around Jesus long enough to respect Jesus' authority. And he yields, even though I think he fully expects that it's futile. There aren't fish out there. He knows this. He's a fisherman. He knows fishing. Doug Greenwald writes that Jesus is bringing submission to bear at the one thing that Peter knows best, fishing. The miracle here has a specific purpose. The purpose of this miracle isn't to just have a lot of fish for the people on shore. It's to bring Peter face to face with an awesome God. You see, Peter thought he was the expert. And he sees in this miracle, in this miraculous catch of fish, that Jesus is the expert over what he's an expert at. Jesus is a better fisherman. He sees that God is an awesome God. Maybe you're familiar with that chorus. God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above. Peter, in this story, was confronted with the awesome God. On Tuesday, in the Tuesday morning Bible study, we looked at this passage and we went back to Isaiah chapter 6 when Isaiah is in the temple and he sees God high and lifted up and he sees this great vision And when he's done, he's like, oh my gosh, I'm ruined. He sees an awesome God. And in both cases, both men were welcomed by that God. Doug Greenwald says that had Peter not yielded to this one small request on the part of God, of Jesus, he would have never experienced this life-changing encounter with him. Think about it. What if he'd said, no, taking my boat into shore, we're done for the day, Jesus. He wouldn't have experienced this. But just like Isaiah in the Old Testament, Peter is confronted with the awesomeness of this man who he has heard could be the Messiah. And life-changing encounters with Jesus present us with a choice. You see, the more that Jesus offers is a worthwhile choice. And Jesus says, don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people. We talked about on Tuesday how Peter probably really didn't understand what that meant, but he was in a situation where he was confronted with the awesomeness of Jesus in that moment. And what he heard Jesus saying is, from now on, if you make the choice to align yourself with my priorities, your life is going to matter. You're going to live a life that matters for eternity. Now, this wasn't an easy choice. Think about it. Peter was probably very fearful about leaving his occupation of fishing. How was he going to live? How was he going to provide for his family? They were probably fearful, he and his friends, about the idea of doing something they had never done before, following this rabbi. And Peter was also fearful, I think, because in that moment when he's kneeling before Jesus and saying, I'm a sinful man, he's recognizing his own inadequacies and his own weaknesses. But in the midst of those fears, the presence of the awesome was greater than that fear. Jesus offered more, the more that Peter longed for, to live a life that mattered. And that desire in us hasn't changed in 2,000 years. This incident is a major turning point. It's a change in the way in which Jesus is perceived by the disciples, and also the way that they perceive themselves as he invites them into his ministry. It was a step further in Peter's journey with Jesus, a step deeper in commitment and relationship with Jesus. And he uses an interesting word here. In verse 5, he says, Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything, but because you say so, I will let down the nets. Master, term of respect. But when the miraculous catch of fish comes in, notice what Peter says in verse 8. Go away from me, Lord. Jesus has moved from being someone I respect to someone who has authority over my life now. Jesus is no longer just his master, Jesus is his Lord. And in verse 11 it says, they, the other fishermen with him, they made that choice to leave everything and to follow him. It's a worthwhile choice. And Jesus is here today saying the same thing to you and to me. He says, follow me. Don't be afraid. Align your life with my mission. Will you take the next step in the journey that I'm laying before you? Or will you settle to keep doing the things you know best, that you're most comfortable with? I thought it was interesting that Billy isn't in here right now, but when he was sharing about their DVD series, Goliath Must Fall, two of the things that must fall. The first one was fear. And do you remember what he said they're talking about today? Comfort. Your comfort must fall. And it requires a choice. In Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, when Indiana makes it to that room where there's all these cups and he's got to choose which one is the Holy Grail, the man that has been there all that time says, you must choose, but choose wisely, because because just as the true grail will give you life, the false one will take it from you. And I want to assure you that this doesn't mean that I'm telling you that Jesus is asking you to give up your day job. But it does mean, as Rod Edmondson says, that we have to make a resolution to drop my agenda and to join his, to get off my path and to get on his, to release my ambitions and to embrace his, to set aside my will and to live his. You see, the wise choice, the choice which goes against everything that makes sense to us, is the choice that results in the miraculous catch and results in a life that truly matters for eternity. As I prepared this message, I brought a song to Mimi that neither she nor Bob knew, and they graciously prepared it today. It's a song about a life that matters because of following Jesus.
Trained I went to heaven, and you were there with me. We walked upon the streets of gold, beside the crystal sea. We heard angels singing, and someone called your name. We turned and saw a young man, and he was smiling as he came. And he said, "Friend, you may not know me." And then he said, "But wait, you used to teach my Sunday school when I was only 8. And every week you would say a prayer before the class would start. And one day when you said that prayer, I asked Jesus in my heart. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am the life that was changed. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am so glad you gave. Then another man stood before you and said, "Remember the time a missionary came to your church and his pictures made you cry. You didn't have much money, but you gave it anyway. Jesus took the gift you gave, and that's why I'm here today. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am the life that was changed. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am so glad you gave." One by one they came, far as the eye could see, each life somehow touched by your generosity. Little things that you had done, sacrifices made, unnoticed on the earth, in heaven now proclaimed. And I know up in heaven you're not supposed to cry, but I am almost sure there were tears in your eyes that life that was changed. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am so glad you gave. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am the life that was changed. Thank you for giving to the Lord. I'm so glad you gave. I am so glad you gave.
Nelson Mandela said, may your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. Peter chose the hope of a life that would matter for eternity. That song always makes me cry. Think about the people, including us, that can thank Peter for saying yes. He's not remembered just as a fisherman, but as a fisher of men. It cost him his life, figuratively and literally, and I don't believe that Peter ever regretted the decision that day to leave everything and follow Jesus, because great is his reward. And I pray today that we will be courageous, that our choices will reflect our hope in Christ and not our fears. You pray with me. Jesus, as I hear that song every time, I think about the people that gave in ways that were probably sacrificial for them, for me to be where I am now, and for me to be in heaven with you one day. And it's a reminder, Father, as we see Peter saying yes to you, that we don't have to be experts at anything. We just need to yield our lives to you. Father, wherever each one of us is today in that journey today, we are encountering you in this moment. And we know what it is you're asking us to yield to you in. Help us to say yes and to leave behind the things that are comfortable, the things that make us fearful, and to be fishers in a sense of people, bringing them to you, and we will meet them again.